Hello, the date is the 29th of November. It's Tuesday, but this is the Ask TCW podcast live. Yes, hello and welcome along to this special podcast because it is on a Tuesday with us having a game against the Cardiff Devils tomorrow on the Wednesday. But we have a lot of questions that you have sent in. So joining me tonight is Jono Bullard.
Good evening.
It's Paul Balm.
Hello.
And back again after his successful stint on last night's podcast is Adam the Ringer Reddish.
Hello, greetings all.
Hello, hello boys. Thank you for joining me. We've got lots of questions to go through. If you are listening live, then feel free to get in touch via Twitter. The hashtag is AskTCW and our handle is @CatsWhiskersTV. I'm going to lump together three questions straight off, boys, because they're all regarding DOPS. So I'll just read through the questions and then we'll get your thoughts on the questions and your answers. So first one, Chris Maltby asks, if DOPS ended up banning Rutherford, which obviously now we know that he has been banned, how do they ensure the ban comes into place once he's fit enough to play? Otherwise, it could run concurrently with his recovery, in which case, what's the point? That's the first question. The second question, what's your opinions on the 2 games for Rutherford and the other DOPS bans? Enough or too lenient? Which then leads on to a very generic question from another podcaster from last night, Anton Marijuan, who basically just puts, what is the point of EIHL DOPS? So very quickly, we'll get something from all of you, but Jono, kick us off.
Well, the Rutherford ban I thought was far too lenient for a start. I think 2 games was nowhere near enough. It was a shocking check to the head, and I was very, very surprised that he only got 2 games. Hagos has been out for 3 games, I believe, now, from that check. So 2 games just seem incredibly lenient, considering that Hagos is still out. Wow, the thing is, when it to ensure the ban comes into place once he's fit. I mean, how it depends how injured Rutherford is, because I mean he was taken to hospital. We don't know. I think that's a really, really difficult one to manage. Plus, if a player gets a ban in any other sport, and I'm thinking mainly football now, their ban comes into play straight away. So I don't think you can really do that, because I think that's very, very difficult to manage. As for Ant's question about what is the point of DOPS, well, it's the Department of Player Safety. Now, whatever your opinion of it and whether you think the bans are too harsh or too lenient, it needs to be there, because there has to be some sort of protection. And we can argue all night about whether we think Rutherford's ban was harsh or lenient. I think it was lenient, but at the end of the day, it was still referred to DOPS, and he still got a ban. So I think DOPS is a very much necessary. However, I think it could be run an awful lot better.
Mr. Paul Balm, I'll let you take the floor now.
I don't really think there's much to add to that. The only thing I would probably disagree with is that a player being out injured doesn't necessarily shouldn't necessarily set the length of the ban, because something could happen and the player isn't that injured. Doesn't mean that what they did wasn't bad.
Very true. Adam, do you agree with what Jono and Paul have said?
Yeah, pretty much so. I thought, like Jono, that the penalty for Rutherford was very much on the lenient side. I was expecting 4 or 5 games from that, so two's a bit of a surprise. But there you go. I mean, DOPS have had a good look at it. It's a difficult one, isn't it, about Rutherford being injured at the same time that he's banned. He got injured essentially as a consequence of making the hit. So, it just throws everything up into the air, doesn't it? If he'd not taken, the punishment after the hit, then, he'd be essentially free to play in the third game after the second game ban. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think Jono's right. In football, for example, the ban applies immediately. Unless you're going to start, asking questions about clubs' medical staff, maybe, hiding the sort of severity of players' injuries, then it's a really difficult one to try and, clarify. So you just have to, I think, put the ban in straight away. It has to apply pretty much from the time that DOPS look at an incident. But, Jono's also right about DOPS. There does need to be something in place. Otherwise, it'd be a real free-for-all, wouldn't it? And you'd have anarchy on the ice, and not every game, that's been a bit OTT, but you need something to regulate the actions of players, just to keep them in check and make sure that they don't start taking advantage of the weaknesses of certain teams, particular teams that might not be built with many physical players or enforcers.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, obviously it's called Department of Player Safety. I'm not sure they're actually protecting the players, to be honest. But just very quickly, Paul, just going back to kind of Amy's question and the other DOPS bans. Obviously, there was the name has gone from me, but the Brayhead clan, Corey Cowick, who pushed Chris Wells, the lino, he got 6 games. Do you think was that sort of enough, or was that too harsh in your opinion? Because I think obviously that's not happened so far this season, so they had an opportunity to kind of lay the law and say that, look, this doesn't happen. Where I think all these checks to the head, once they give 2 games for one person, it kind of feels for me that that's the standard, we can't go more, because then people will say that we didn't do it for to the other guy. But that one, obviously, sort of abuse of the official. What was your view on that?
Well, I mean, going back to that, the only precedent that's ever set by DOPS, as far as I can work out, is that no precedents are ever set. But in terms of the Cowick, I mean, he puts his hands on an official. You can't do that. I think 6 games. I think I read somewhere 6 games is the minimum they could have given him anyway, and it's fair enough. He pushes the referee, and you just don't do that. And if you get 6 games for that, then that's fair enough as far as I'm concerned.
I agree, totally agree. Like I was saying last night, officials need to be protected. Okay, they're not perfect and they make bad decisions, but at the end of the day, we need officials. So you have to protect them to a degree. So you can't have players going around and jostling and being physical with officials, whether they're referees or linesmen, because at the end of the day, we need these linesmen and we need these referees to officiate games, or else there wouldn't be any games. It's as simple as that, in my view.
I see Thompson on the panel tonight. Only now some woman.
Oh, that's the worst I've ever been called.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much for your question, those 3. But we'll move on to a couple of other questions now. And Paul, I'm just going to ask you this one, because obviously Jono and Adam were on last night's podcast. But it's Alistair St. Clair that asks, and obviously they asked, do you think the team will be able to bring their good form from Adents into the league? Now, obviously, you wasn't on last night's podcast. We had a 4-point weekend, but what's your view on that 4-point weekend, and do you think the team can build on it into this league weekend coming up?
No.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Any more to add on that, or is it just a simple no?
No. 4 points, no stars, no cohesion, no spark. I saw something on Twitter today where the Panthers players were introduced to some school kids. They want to try introducing themselves to each other. So many missed passes. So I mean, I could have saved myself 13 quid with with the Belfast game and just bought a DVD of one of the other ones. Exactly the same.
True.
We got 4 points, and you can't argue with that, but we didn't get entertained.
No, I think that's fair to say. But if you do want to listen to what Adam, Jono, Tina and Anton Marijuan said about the weekend just gone, then do listen to the review podcast that is available via our website. But obviously, seamlessly moving on from Edents, we will now talk about some Continental Cup questions, and we've had a couple in, and we'll start off with Lee Constable, who says, with the Panthers making it through to the final of the Continental Cup, it's quite exciting, and if it was to be hosted in Nottingham, that would be really exciting from my point of view. If we was to win it, where would it rank in our history of winning trophies? Which would be a better achievement, winning the Continental Cup or winning the Elite League title, with obviously the league being very, very tough? So we'll start off with Adam. What's your view on that?
I would still maintain that winning the Elite League would be a better achievement than winning the Continental Cup. Obviously, if you want to win the league, you've got to be the best over a long period of time, the entire season. You've got to be better than 9 other sides. Yes, I do agree with Lee that it is exciting to be in the final of the Continental Cup. But I got to say, some of the sides that we've brushed aside so far to get to where we are haven't exactly been, even of an Elite League standard. I'm thinking of the Turkish side, I'm thinking of the Spanish side. Even the lowest teams in the Elite League, could brush those teams aside easily. So I really think that, yes, it's great that we've got to the final of the Continental Cup, but have we seriously been challenged so far? Probably not. So we know a bit about Edents, because obviously we were in the group during the last stage. Got 2 new teams to contend with. I think it'll be a real challenge. But I still think that overall, winning the league is a far bigger deal for me in my list of priorities than winning the Continental Cup.
Paul, we were over in Belfast in the season 2012-2013 to see the Panthers win the league. But for you, where does if we do win the Continental Cup, where does that rank amongst that famous night in Belfast?
It won't. It will be nice to win it if we win it. You always want to win anything you enter. But, we waited so long for the league. And the league is what the club should be about. Should be about winning the domestic trophies. And then, the Continental Cup, whatever, it's jam on top of the bread and butter. But it's the bread and butter you've got to concentrate on. You've got to concentrate on walking before you can run.
Fair dues. Jono, obviously you were there as well. Where will the Continental Cup victory, if that occurs, rank alongside a league win for you?
I think I'm going to disagree with the other two. I don't think it's as good as a league win. Don't get me wrong, the league win. Winning the league will always be and should be the priority in my view. However, only 4 UK teams, with us included now, have actually made the final of the Continental Cup. No one's won it. If we become the first British team to win the Continental Cup, that will be huge. Not only for us, but also for the league as a whole. Because I think we may be viewed a little bit more seriously because we'll have gone and won the second highest ranking European trophy, and also the kudos that I think it'll bring. I think it'll be massive if we win the Continental Cup. Should it replace the priority of winning the league? No, absolutely not. However, I think if we do win the Continental Cup, it will rank as probably the second best achievement in our history after the league win.
Okay, but you just obviously said that it would, bring us a lot of kudos and that. But what will that bring us? Because we were the first team the first Elite League team to compete in the CHL, and we thought that would bring us maybe a better quality of player. From that moment, we haven't really seen many of that, really. So what would a Continental Cup win for us? What would that mean? I
just think it'd be a huge kudos towards the league. Probably not us as an individual club, but the league as a whole, as in the Elite League. And don't think for a second that us being in the Champions Hockey League didn't bring any kudos the league's way, because it did. I mean, you only have to look at what's happened since. I mean, we've had 3 teams have entered, Braehead, Sheffield and ourselves, and we've all won games in the Champions Hockey League when nobody gave us a chance. So, yeah, I think the IIHF are starting to view the Elite League probably a little more favourably. And from what I could pick up at the weekend, I believe that the NIC is certainly probably the favourite to host the final. I think a couple of things have got to be ironed out, but I think it's looking that the NIC may get it, and I think that'll be absolutely huge for us, because I think that gives us the best chance to win that competition.
Okay, well, hopefully we should know the result of that pretty soon, but we'll move on to another question. And this one comes from Nick Foreman, still sticking on the Continental Cup games. And it's something that you kind of brought up, Adam, when you was just answering the previous one. But Nick asks, do you think that the first round of Continental Cup games lulled the team into a false sense of security because it was almost too easy? And when they came back, they forgot how to play against quality opposition. And therefore, the last round in Denmark almost forced them to play a lot better, and it lit a fire under them for when they returned home. Now, obviously, Adam, you mentioned about sort of the quality of players and team that we faced over in Jaka in the first round, a little bit better in a dense. So do you think that's maybe played a part in the weekend just gone and when we came back from Jaka?
Well, not really. I mean, to be honest, I disagree with Nick a little bit in what he says about, having the team having a fire lit under them for when they return home, because yes, we won both games at the weekend, but as Paul said earlier, they were won in very, very boring, dour fashion. There was no excitement really for either of the wins over the weekend. It's not like the players came out and took it to Belfast on Friday night and absolutely let them have it both barrels. There's no evidence of that. Yes, we won the game. We just did enough to win it. And you have to look in context at it. Manchester beat Belfast 5-1 the following night. So I really don't think that our efforts in Odense, as good as they were in qualifying out of the group to the final stage, really did anything in terms of the long-term prospect of how this Panthers side is going to fare going forwards in the league campaign.
Okay, Paul, I don't think I really need to ask you that question, especially with the words lit a fire under them for when they returned home, do I really?
Well, if they lit a fire under them, they get their arses burned, because they were still pretty low, it would appear.
Okay, we will move on to the third question regarding the Continental Cup, and this one comes from Kenwyn Jones, and he asks, on top of current injuries, is another 3 Continental Cup games in January a concern for Panthers' title chances? So I'm going to ask Paul this and Jono, because obviously you've got slightly different views on the Continental Cup, but Paul, obviously, like you said, it's the jam on top of the bread and butter. Is it a concern that that potentially another 3 games could hamper our fixture list? I won't say league campaign, because you never know what it's going to be like in January.
It's not going to hamper our league challenge, because that's already gone. I think, to be honest, the next month is going to be more of a challenge than January.
Yeah, good.
We've got something like 13, 14 games in 31 days or something.
Yes, 13 games. I think I read an article in the Post that most teams have got 13, and funnily enough, Cardiff are the only one that's haven't got 13. They've got 10. But sorry, carry on.
But yeah, I mean, that sort of congestion, could call it money grabbing, I suppose, if you wanted to. But I think that's going to have a big effect as well.
Jono, obviously you mentioned that Nottingham potentially talk of it being the favourite. That will help. But is another 3 Continental Cup games and the potential of injuries a concern for you, or is it, look, we're there, let's go and win it?
It's a concern, but it's a necessary evil. If you're going to be in these competitions, then these are the schedules that you have to take up, unfortunately. And 3-3 is never easy, but all the other teams who play in the Continental Cup have the same schedule, and all the teams in the final will have the same. But I think I agree with Paul, certainly that December is probably more of a concern. And I suppose it depends how seriously we are taking the Continental Cup. It was mentioned as a priority, so will the management think about bringing in some reinforcements to try and win that?
Well,
that sort of nullifies the fact of any potential injuries, doesn't it?
Well, Jono Bullard, you link perfectly onto another question. And this one comes from Richard Short. And he says, Neil Black said the Continental Cup was a major priority near the beginning of July. The article in the Post said it could impact on their season, although it was vague as to whether this was from Black or just journalistic licence. I guess the question for the Cat's Whiskers is whether you think the club should put this trophy first, even to the detriment of the league campaign. So I think we've kind of touched on that already with your all individual views. So what I'm kind of just going to ask you is, do you think from the organisation's point of view that when you kind of list everything in order this season, the Continental Cup is number 1 on the list? Paul, you can go first.
So are you saying, do you think the club are putting it that way?
Yes.
Well, you could argue. I'm not sure, to be honest, but you could argue that it looks like that. I mean, I didn't see any of the games in Odense. I was away, but talking to my kids, they said they were playing like a different team. And then you come back to last weekend. So you've got to it. Whether they are or not, I don't know. But evidence like that does sort of suggest that might be the case.
Jono, you've seen both Continental Cup rounds. Commentated on the last one. Was part of the filming crew for the first one. Do you think the organisation is prioritising that potentially this season?
If you'd have asked me after Jacka, I would have said no, because we went into that in good form. Now I'd probably change my mind and say, yeah, I think they are. We're out of the league, so we may as well prioritise it. However, don't think for one second that I'm happy that our league challenge is over in November, because quite frankly, that is disgraceful. Even by our standards, where we tend to be out of it by Christmas, to be out of it by November is absolutely unacceptable. However, on the plus side, we have a chance to become the first UK team to win the Continental Cup, and I think it has been made a priority by the management, and let's go and win it, because let's face it, I think it's probably our best chance of silverware this season.
Okay, and just finally, Adam, I mean, do you have anything to kind of add on what Paul and Jono have said?
I think the fact that Neil Black alluded to the fact that the Continental Cup was a major priority has definitely been evident in the style of hockey and the games that I've seen, because like Paul said, his kids said that they noticed a distinctly different Panthers side playing between the ones in the league and the Continental Cup campaign. And I've got to say, I've seen quite a lot of the Continental Cup games that the Panthers have been involved in this year, and I'm minded to agree. So if that message has come down from the top of the organisation, it's certainly clear that the players are responding more to Continental Cup challenges than they are to the challenges that the domestic league is posing to them. And Jono's right in some sense, in that the league has gone. It's well in the rearview mirror now. So we might as well take advantage of the fact that we are within 3 games of doing something that the club's never done before, which is, and anybody else in this country has done, which is to win a European competition. And, like everyone else has said, does that excuse Panthers' abject performance and showing in the league so far this year? No, not in the slightest. But, you take the trophies whenever they come, so we might as well have a shot at this and, at least put Panthers on the map. But, what happens after that? Because this tournament is going to be done and dusted, quite early into the league season. Are we just going to drift if we win the competition? And basically just write off the second half of the league campaign and then suddenly turn it back on again when the playoffs come around? Because, if that happens, then there'll be even more disgust from the Panthers fan base than there is at the moment.
Okay, well, thank you for your answers there, folks, and thank you for the question. Richard, sticking kind of on, we've had a question regarding Neil Black, so we'll tie that into what's just been asked. This one comes from Graham Thompson, also known as Clantastic on Twitter, and he says, with his teams 5th and 8th in the league, would this be a good time for Neil Black to break his silence with Panthers and Clan fans? Mr. Balm.
And say what?
Well, do you think he needs to say anything?
Yeah, that's the great. At the end of the day, he's the money man, so he's probably really happy. Especially if Bray had managed to sell those signed pugs for £25 a pop. Mind you, if you got that much money, then you want to spend that much money on something, then you deserve somebody taking it off you. I don't get why it has to be Neil Black. When people say, "Oh, Neil Black should be saying this, Neil Black should be saying that." He's the chairman. He has obviously decided to set himself apart from that and let them get on with it. But I don't know why people are sort of clamouring for him to say something. The clubs themselves, then yes, and I suppose we'd all like a little bit, things be a bit more open, a bit more realistic. We don't want a set of excuses. We want somebody to turn up once in a while and say, yeah, we're not very good at the moment. And I'd rather see that happen than something from Neil Black.
I mean, Adam, we're big football fans. Yourself, Notts County, myself, Nottingham Forest.
Does that count?
Apparently
it's
so. It's
football, but not as you know it.
It's a different sport, obviously, but we've currently got an owner that is very, very vocal on social media. County have had their troubles in the past, but do you think an owner of an ice hockey club should be coming out and saying things and breaking his silence, or like Paul says, he's just a money man, isn't he?
He is a money man. He's the figurehead of the club. He employs other people, namely the general managers, to do all the speaking to the local press and the media. It's
and
difficult,
the club
isn't
spokeswoman.
And the club spokeswoman. Sorry, I can't forget the club spokeswoman. But these are the people that need to convey what the owner's thinking about current matters on the ice. Because yes, Neil Black's got a fairly long history now with ice hockey. He's been involved in the sport for many, many years. But, at the end of the day, he's an owner. And surely the owner will say to the respective general managers of Brayhead and Panthers, look, these are your objectives. This is where I want you to be in the league. If we're falling way short of that, fair enough. Maybe the owner of the club, maybe Neil Black, should break his silence and say, look, this is unacceptable, if only to appease the fans that are becoming quite irate here at Panthers. And I suspect that the Brayhead fans aren't too happy about the way their season's panning out at the moment. But normally, just relating back to that football analogy that you had mentioned, Aaron, a minute ago, the owner of Notts at the moment, Ray True, has got himself into hot water several times over the last 6 years, his own Notts, because he's made all sorts of promises by speaking to the local press that haven't been met, and not been followed through with. So, I suppose Neil Black is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he breaks the silence and speaks to the press, because it just gives fans another stick to beat him with. And am I saying that Neil Black's done everything perfectly? No, I don't think he probably has. But I don't think that we can say that he needs to be regularly speaking out and having dialogue with fans at both teams that he owns to try and tell us how things are going, because he employs people to do that job.
Okay. Don't forget, if you are listening along live, you can get in touch with us. Just use the hashtag AskTCW if you're on Twitter, and our handle is @CatsWhiskersTV. Colin Baseford has actually got in touch with us, just referring to some of the Continental Cup talk that we've been saying, and he says Continental Cup will mean one thing and one thing only: the Panthers hiking prices up to watch your new European champions. Agree. So we'll favourite that tweet, and if we win the Continental Cup, your question will be the first one that we ask and answer, Colin. But we'll move away from all things Panthers for the moment, because we've got some generic Elite League questions in, and we'll actually go to a positive question that we've had in this evening from a very good friend of the show, listens all the time. His name's Patrick Smith. He does another podcast, a small podcast across the water, but I think, to be honest, he's going to be part of the Manchester Storm's podcast the way he's going. But he says 2 more years of the Friendship 4, a total success 2 years running. Is it time the Elite League showed it some support? Now, for people that might not know, the Friendship 4 has been renewed for 2 more years at the SSE Arena, a very big success. The weekend just gone. Jono, you were part of the TV crew that filmed that and broadcast that, so I'll let you take the floor with that first. Do you think the Elite League should back this, or do you think it's kind of Belfast's in a way?
Yes, I do think the Elite League should show it some more support, because it's the best hockey we'll see in this country in this season, because the teams are superb. It's an excellently run tournament. Yes, Belfast are very much at the forefront of it. It's very much their baby. They organise it, bring it all together and run it, and if the weekend just gone is anything to go by, they run it absolutely superbly. But I think the Elite League should show it some support. It's a really good news story for British hockey, because we're attracting these teams over to come and play a tournament over here, and the first 2 games are actual conference games for the NCAA, so they actually mean something. And then on the Saturday you have the 3rd and 4th place game and the final. Now, the 3rd and 4th place game is something that the Elite League maybe should have a good look at, because that was just incredible. An incredible game of hockey. Intense. Checks thrown. Someone was thrown out on a match penalty for a check to the head in a 3rd and 4th.
Yeah.
And it was brutal, but some of the hits were brutal. Yeah. And I spoke to the coach of UMass Amherst in one of the intervals, and he said it's the most intense consolation game you'll ever see, and he was absolutely spot on. So yes, I think it should be shown a bit more support by the Elite League, and because it's something that they could probably get some publicity off the back of, from probably linking up with the NCAA. Okie
dokie. We will leave that there, because obviously Jono worked on that. Adam, you were watching the delights of the Panthers along with Paul as well. So we'll leave Jono to answer that one on his own. But thank you very much for your question, Patrick, and I hope you're very well, mate. Moving on to another friend of the show, Sean Phillips, obviously a Cardiff Devils fan. I'm sure he's looking forward to the game tomorrow, but he's probably in bed now getting his sleep because he is that young. But he asks... On Sunday, just a joke, Sean. On Sunday, Paul Thompson was aggrieved at the referee consulting a goal judge to make the correct call and disallow a goal, even though a goal was initially awarded. A few weeks ago in Edinburgh, a goal decision went against his club, and he was told that goal judges have no say in the decision. What is your opinion on referees using the goal judges to make the correct call on the night? And should the league implement goal line technology this late into the season? Mr. Balm.
Which bit do you want me to start with?
I mean, what's your initial reaction on Paul Thompson's kind of comment and the some woman kind of view?
He doesn't exactly paint himself in a very good light, does he?
No, it's not the best thing you could say, is it? I suppose.
No, I mean, what's the difference? What's the difference between being a man and a woman? Can't a man and a woman, or how is a man inherently better at looking at a rectangle of metal covered in net with ice on the bottom to see whether a black thing's crossed a red line or not, and then press a button? What's the difference?
Here.
But the league won't do anything. The league probably, well, you can argue whether they should or shouldn't all night. Again, he's insulted officials. Will he get any sort of censure for that? Somehow I doubt it. But goal line technology is running before we can walk again. There's so many things. Yes, we should have it, but there are so many things we've got to get in place and do properly first before we have anything like that. And if you can't consult the goal judges, why are they there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Adam, anything to add? I mean, goal line technology. Obviously, it was supposed to be in this season.
Yep.
I mean, do you think it shouldn't come in?
Oh no,
during the season, or do you think it should?
It depends, doesn't it? I'm a fan of using technology because ultimately everybody wants the right outcome. We all want the right decision. And to be honest, in the absence of goal line technology and cameras, as Paul said, we've got goal judges. The clue's in the name. If there's any dispute about whether the puck went over the line or not, you consult the goal judge. It might take a few seconds extra, but surely every fan wants to know that the referee has consulted maybe somebody that had a better view than him or one of his linesmen, to ultimately make the right call. So it's frustrating to see coaches like Thompson, vent his spleen yet again for the 1,000th time over, an issue where the Elite League have actually said that they want the goal line technology, but they've not actually, come good on their word and introduced and implemented it. It should definitely be in. I'm a massive fan of bringing technology in. So bringing it in mid-season, yeah, actually, why not? I don't think it's going to be very disruptive, is it? It's not like it's going to cause the games to be too disjointed, because we've seen in cricket, we've seen in football more recently. It can be brought in without too much disruption. And as I said at the start, I'm a fan of getting the right decision. I'd rather have a second pair of eyes look at something, or maybe a camera look at something, if it means that the right outcome is reached, and therefore it takes away that sort of license for an official, for a coach or somebody associated with a club, a player or whoever, to start criticising the officials for what's perceived to be the wrong decision.
Jono, just very quickly, goal line technology, bring it in during a season, or does it need to be from the very beginning of a season?
No, bring it in. I mean, they told us 2 months ago it was going to be 2 weeks, so that makes the league look a bit amateur, in my opinion. So, and they say, well, some rinks haven't got it. So what? Just implement it with whoever's got it. And let's just go with it, because
I agree.
It's ridiculous, frankly.
I'm not sure I agree with the fact. I think it's got to be in all rinks if it comes into the league. You can't have it in one rink on a Saturday where you go and play a game, and then on a Sunday it's not there.
Okay, Wimbledon tennis tournament. They have Hawkeye on the show courts. It's not on every court.
And they've got loads of money. That's even worse. No, I agree with Aaron. It's got to be across the board or not at all.
Hang on a minute. Did Paul Balm just agree with me?
Move on.
Stop the show.
Moving on.
I'm just on iTunes looking for Handel's Messiah.
Okay, let's move on to another question, and it's regarding a league competition, which is obviously the Challenge Cup. And it's a question from Lee Constable again, and he says, talking about the Challenge Cup, it was spoken about recently on a podcast about the draws and the lack of magic the cup seems to have right now. Obviously, the Panthers, if we progress, we got Braehead, then potentially Sheffield. We have got Sheffield in the semi-final if we beat Braehead, so it's the same as the last few seasons, really. But would it be possible to have a Challenge Cup format like football does with the FA Cup? Could they do the Challenge Cup with teams competing against each other from different tiers of British ice hockey, like the EPL and the Elite League, or even further down? It could make it more interesting. You could have some potential giant killings along the way. I mean, it could totally be a no-go, but I just wanted to see what you all thought. It's a great idea, but it's just not feasible in my eyes. Sadly, the Challenge Cup needs drastic reworking, and I think it's a great idea, but I just can't see that ever happening. Does anybody have any different views on that?
It has got very, very samey for me. And, it's getting to the point now where, is it starting to devalue the actual achievement of winning the competition? Yeah, I think it is to me, actually. It's starting to get that way. I mean, I'd be a real advocate of bringing in non-elite league teams to a competition, because the way things are at the moment, the Elite League operates in a vacuum, and it's like there's no interaction with other ice hockey at all, and I think that's wrong. Even in football, for example, I know the FA Cup example is often cited as something that ice hockey should try and replicate. You'll never get that because there isn't the same depth of clubs, but we still need some fresh teams, just to see other sides over the course of a season is, to me, better for the variety of sport in this country as a whole. And you might have to, maybe drop the import limit, for the Elite League teams, and say, right, you can only go into the games with, say, 6 to give, the sides in the EPL a bit of a chance, a bit of a giant killing potential. But I think that the same old Challenge Cup year in, year out is very, very dull and tedious for me.
Jono or Paul, do you think it's feasible? Would you like to see that, either of you?
It would be nice, but I'm almost convinced that this was mooted a few years ago and the lower league clubs didn't want to know.
All right. Why do you think that is? Just,
I guess it's probably because they thought they'd get beaten. I really don't know. This is a few years back, and my memory is really not what it was.
Okie dokie.
It's Wednesday at the moment.
Jono, just very quickly, anything to add on that? Or
I think it's a nice idea, but I just think it'd be far too one-sided between say an Elite League team got, I don't know, say for example you've got Sheffield against Manchester Phoenix, with the trouble they're in at the minute. That could be, well, it doesn't even bear thinking about. I think
you see Sheffield there.
It's a nice idea, but I just don't think it's feasible with the strength of the teams.
Oh no, I think you're right. There is a marked difference between the Elite League teams and the EPL sides, but might it be helpful for Manchester to get a visit from an Elite League club and all the fans that would inevitably go and watch the side, to fill the rink?
Well, that's one of the things that's been sort of raised before, isn't it? That if the Elite League team was drawn against a team at a lower level, the game was automatically at the lower levels.
Yeah.
Put some money into them, but then you're going to get, because of the way the Elite League is run by the owners, they're going to turn around, what's in it for us?
Yeah,
it's going to cost us money.
True.
Okay, we'll move on from that question, but thank you very much for sending that one in. Just very quickly, we'll kind of wrap up the whole league in general with a question from Chris Lovell, and he asks, do you think the league point system should change? Give 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or penalty shot win, 1 point for an overtime penalty shot loss. He thinks it would add some extra spice with teams really fighting for the regulation win. Now, I think we've discussed this on previous podcasts as well. But I mean, Jono, do you think that would be a good idea? Do you think it would actually make people go for the regulation win?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Should happen. Most of the leagues in Europe do it that way. Yeah, absolutely. The Continental Cup, that's how that's run. Yeah.
I mean, Adam or Paul, why do you think that's not actually been implemented?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's been raised at the league level, as to whether it should be trialled. But it was part of the Super League, wasn't it, several years ago?
Yeah, one season.
Yeah, very true.
Our
we
first
had
season in the arena.
Season.
Yeah.
And back then, even though we had a very, very poor side, I thought it was right for the league as a whole to be playing to that sort of point structure, because it just makes a side want to come out and win rather than park the coach in front of the net. The bus coach, that is, not the actual coach of the team. Although sometimes they're one and the same. But yeah, I mean, it just stops defensive hockey. Well, not stops defensive hockey, because sides will still probably be happy to settle for a point, but it might remove the number of teams that go to another barn and say, right, we're just going to play a very defensive style of hockey, and we're quite happy to walk away with a point, if we take it to 60 minutes and then either lose in overtime or in penalty shots.
Okie dokie then. Thank you very much for that question, Chris. We'll move on from that, but I do think it would be quite good to see that implemented into the Elite League. We'll move back to the Panthers now, and we've had a question from Sam Balm, and he asks, who is the form team right now, Paul Balm?
Well, I know it's not. But having said that, apart from last weekend, we were very possibly the most consistent team in November.
Consistently awful.
Well, I mean, who could it be? Dundee? No, they're winning and losing with almost one after the other. I'd have to probably go say Cardiff, personally.
Anybody else disagree with that?
Well, just to back Paul up on this, if anybody has got the Flash Scores app, they actually have the form tables for the Elite League, and for the past 5 games and the past 10 games, Cardiff are top of the form table, and also the past 15 games. So I think the answer is quite convincingly and categorically Cardiff.
Okay, so I'm going to
disagree with that.
I'm going to go with the Nottingham Panthers. So moving on, we will move on to another question. But Sam, thank you very much for your question. I hope Mr. Balm Senior answered it correctly in your eyes. Okay.
If I tell him I did, he'll agree. Yeah.
Obviously, always listen to your dad. Right, moving on to another question. We will go to another Panthers-related question, and this one comes from the Cage, and it comes from Ginla, and he asks, why do Panthers not do a webcast? Ooh, shivers when I read out that word webcast. When one only has to look at Sheffield's ever-growing crowds to see that since they started doing them, Sheffield's crowds have actually increased pretty strongly. Now, like I say, the dreaded webcast, I would also say that coincided with those webcasts have been 2 back-to-back league titles. I know they did webcasts before then, but I do think obviously that would have an effect on the crowds. But I will open it up to you 3. Why do Panthers not do a webcast, Jono Bullard?
Well, because they think that it will detract from the crowd that we currently get. I will counter that. I was away in Belfast. I was on the ferry coming home on Sunday, the ferry that had Wi-Fi, I could have watched the game on a webcast. So there's £8 they're missing out on. A friend of ours, Ian, he couldn't make it. He could have watched it. There's another £8. Tina was in Iceland with Wi-Fi. She could have watched it. There's another £8. So you're sort of seeing a pattern here. And the 3 people I've mentioned are all season ticket holders, so that is extra income they're missing out on. I think it's ridiculous that we don't do one, frankly. Absolutely ridiculous, because I think we're missing out on thousands and thousands of pounds.
I would just like to say I think it's amazing that Iceland offer Wi-Fi. I can only thank Kerry Katona and Peter Andre. Adam, why don't we do a webcast? Come on,
I don't know. I think the club are in the dark ages over this. I really do. I mean, if you look at the general composition of a crowd on a match night, particularly a weekend game, you've got loads and loads of groups of guys and women that are out, they see the Panthers as maybe like the starting point for a bigger night out. So, these are the people. If the club think that only those that are in the arena on a match night are those that are, likely to go and watch Panthers live, then I think they're totally misguided, because we should be offering this up as a service. If smaller clubs with far smaller fan bases than the Panthers are prepared to put a webcast out, then I feel that, Panthers are doing their fans a disservice. As Jono just said, friends of ours who have already committed their season ticket monies to the club, who, for one reason or another, aren't able to come and watch live hockey, but will be perfectly willing to purchase a webcast so they can watch it wherever they are. This is treating your fan base with respect, and this is why I think the Panthers are becoming increasingly at odds with the majority of their fan base, because they're not offering things that the fans are coming to expect as normality. That's why I think that a webcast enables the fans to stay in touch with the club. Because if you can't get to a game for whatever reason, I'm sure there are lots and lots of Panthers fans that can't make games, whether it's the odd one or bunches of games. These people still want to be part of the club. They want to follow the fortunes of the team that they support. And I think to say, no, we're not having a webcast because it might affect crowds is, effectively cutting off an element of your fan base. And I just think that's fundamentally unfair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much, Ginla, for that question. Okay, we'll start to wrap this up now with the final 3 questions. And we will go to Max Artis, who asks, what benefits will the Supporters Trust have, and will it change anything? Paul Balm.
I think we've probably covered this in the past. One of the things it can do is create. The idea is that to create a bond, a relationship, a connection. The thing we just talked. Adam was talking about being missing. Have you fallen asleep?
or opened a packet of crisps. I'm not too sure, but there we go.
Oh, don't remind me which of us works in the media and knows about how these things work.
Jono's being rather quiet right now at the moment.
It's because he's eating crisps. It's about creating a relationship, building it with the club, and trying to give the supporters a voice. Will it work? I really don't know. It's we've just Adam's just been talking very eloquently about how entrenched the club seems to be. The new ideas like webcasts. I actually think it's probably a good idea we don't do webcasts. We don't. I mean, only 5,000-6,000 people seeing how bad we are. We don't want the whole world knowing. But it's they're so entrenched. They're so. This is what we do. This is what we do. Therefore, this is right. Yeah. That somebody coming in, even with a very positive attitude, and saying not saying you're doing this wrong, and saying how can we help you do this better. I think Well, they're probably going to have a very sore forehead.
Okay. If you're interested in the Nottingham Panthers Supporters Trust that has recently been invented, then go on to Twitter. Their Twitter handle is @NPSupporters, and I'm sure if you ask them any questions, they'll be able to answer them for you.
Better than I could, anyway.
No, don't.
Well,
don't be,
just quickly, we will. I know Rob has said who has set up the Supporters Trust. He says he'd like to come on a show in the future, so we will get him on, so you can put questions to him through this format, and I think that will probably help answer a lot of questions that people do have.
There you go. Thank you very much, Jono. What was you eating? Discos, skips?
I'm not eating anything.
Okay, moving on. Ted Logan, talking about maybe eating and drinking, he asks the question, what are your views on players' social habits, namely smoking and drinking? Many feel that drinking a beer during the calendar session, but I imagine season as well, is unacceptable. Personally, I didn't see a problem. Getting wasted the night before a game is a different matter, of course. Is there a drinking culture at the club? Are the players given too much free rein and so they abuse it? Adam, just very quickly, because we are quite tight on time, but I mean these are professional sports people, but they're also human, aren't they? You know, to ban people from beer for a whole 9 months is maybe a bit too far, is it?
I think that would be too draconian. I mean, you're right, the professional sportsman. I'm a firm believer that, you need to get everything in balance. So, they are professional sportsmen. They do need to be at their optimal physical performance levels, when they take to an ice. But I think if you expect them to, live like monks, that, no disrespect to monks out there amongst the TCW listeners.
We've not got a big following amongst the monasteries, Adam. I think you're all right.
Okay, but if you expect the players
to podcast,
if you expect the players to live lifestyles like Trappist monks, then I think that the players themselves are not going to find any fun in playing hockey in Nottingham. Now, it shouldn't all be about fun, because fundamentally they are here to win games and they're here to perform and please the crowd and put points on the board. But there is a balance to be struck. Common sense dictates that, as the tweet said, you don't want players going out on the raz the night before a game, putting them in a bad position to win the game the following day. But they are human, as you say, Aaron, so they should be allowed the odd beer or three, especially maybe if they've won a game and they've played well. Where's the harm in that? There's this sort of response, isn't there, that when a team are in a bad run of form and players are spotted drinking or not conforming to a very strict schedule of maintaining high physical standards, then they get a lot of criticism. But we have to look at it across the whole season. The players are human, so I think they're entitled to a drink or two. So I don't want to take all the enjoyment out or advocate taking the enjoyment out of ice hockey in Nottingham.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, they're adults. You have to treat them like adults. And if you set up your rules of, not drinking 48 hours before a game, etc. Yeah. And if they break those rules, then that's when your management has to be strong and they have to be, punished accordingly within the rules of the organisation. But Thank you very much for your question. I have lost your name. Ted Logan, sorry.
Ted Logan.
Ted, I do apologise, Ted. But we will move on to our last question. And this one comes from somebody called David Spence. And he asks us, how do we feel about the recent public criticism of the podcast? Now, for some people that might not know, yes, people have criticised this podcast for potentially having splinters in our bottoms because we've been sitting on the fence during obviously a very troubled time for the club, etc. And I've not really been on many podcasts of late where this has been talked about, so I will just say my bit very quickly and I'll just pass it on to a couple of you. But for me, everybody's entitled to their opinion. We are not going to please everybody, but this is what this podcast is about. It's about opinions, that being whoever is on the podcast at that time, and obviously, the crowd that we interact with. Not everybody's going to enjoy what we say, and not everybody is going to agree with what we say, but that's fine. If we all lived in a world where we all agreed, then I think it would be a pretty boring world. And from my personal point of view, have your say. If you want to criticise me, I'm well aware that we are kind of, as many people have said, we put ourselves out there to be shot at, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not. Well, I shouldn't really say that, should I? Because they'll probably.
You'd be all right if it was a Panthers forward because of this.
But look, that's fine. I am willing to accept that. I'm on a public podcast. That's fine, but doesn't mean that I'm right. But it also doesn't mean that those people criticising us are right as well. It's just opinions, and like I say, if we didn't have opinions, then we wouldn't have this podcast, to be honest. But Jono and Paul, obviously the whole cat's whisker, and I know, Paul, you did an article kind of tying this in as well, potentially. But the TCW is your two's baby from when it was a TV show, and even before that as well. But just very quickly, because we are touched for time, but what's your view on criticising the cat's whiskers, Paul?
If very, very quickly, read the article. That pretty much says everything. Particularly the last thing. You've got three choices. You either listen to what we do, and if you don't like it, you don't have to listen. Nobody's forcing you. The second option, I can't remember now, and the third one was if you think you can do better, why not? Give it a go. Nobody's, we don't hold the monopoly for Panthers. There are other clubs out there. If you support another club, you could do that. Nobody holds the monopoly for anything. If you ask us nicely, we'll even give you some tips. None of the ones I give you will be any use. But, the main thing I would say, and I said I'd be brief, and I'm really not, is something you said, Aaron. That you were saying that everybody's got their opinions. Well, surely that includes us.
Exactly.
And our opinions might not match yours. That's fine. That's what opinions are like. Opinions, well, they're like backsides. Everybody's got one, and you usually end up with the same thing coming out of them. But, and I've lost the plot. I'll leave it there.
What a great way to lose the plot, though, on bottoms. Jono, just very quickly, obviously from your point of view, I know you commented back to some people and said your bit before, but just to wrap this up for us.
Again, it's our opinions. We are saying everything that we think. However, I will say, I think a couple of comments were aimed at me. Generally, I host the other podcasts, so my job as host is not necessarily to give my opinion, but also to be the devil's advocate a bit, and also offer an alternative opinion. So they aren't my personal opinions, and I think when you hosted the show last week, Aaron, I think my personal opinion came out quite forcefully.
Yeah.
But as host, you do have to play devil's advocate sometimes in order to sort of just offer that alternative. So that's all really I would say, and really, Paul's absolutely right. If you read his article on the Cat's Whiskers, you just go to the Cat's Whiskers website, click on Paul Balm. It's the first article there. That pretty much.
All the other ones are good as well,
and all the other ones, yeah. Give them all a read. They're all cracking. So yeah,
good seats are still available.
Okay, let's wrap that up now, folks. Just so if you're still listening, Babsy, we will answer your question on the next podcast. But thank you very much for getting in touch with us. But yeah, basically, we wouldn't have this podcast if it wasn't for you guys out there. We do really appreciate what you say to us, even if you are offering us constructive criticism. We accept that. But I would just like to say, obviously, a very heartfelt thank you to Mr. Adam Ringer Reddish.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul Bulldozer Balm.
And if anybody wants to buy me a rifle for Christmas, now you know why I'm asking.
And also Jono Bullard.
Jono, no nickname Bullard.
It's a pleasure as always.
Yes, so thank you very much. That is the podcast for this week. We will have one after the Cardiff game, reviewing that one and looking ahead to the double header against the Sheffield Steelers. But thank you very much for listening, and come on, you Panthers in the Devils.